Hello and welcome to the ABO Outfitters podcast. This is podcast number 3. I am your host today, Andrew Murray, and I'm in studio with the rest of the ABO Outfitters team, and we have our very own Jeff Jiggy Andersen in studio. We're going to grill him on all things related to fishing, ice fishing. It's going to be a good one, you guys. Here we go. Okay, and we're back, and I am sitting across today from the man, the myth, the legend, Jeff Andersen, and we are going to dive into Jeff's mind when it comes to ice fishing. I am personally really looking forward to this. I'm more of a passionate hunter myself, but I also love to fish, and I love to learn about ice fishing as much as I possibly can, and this guy has knowledge coming out of his ears. So, Jeff, I'd love for you to just kind of give everybody here that's listening that don't know you a little bit of an introduction about yourself and your history, your long history in the fishing industry.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Joe. First of all, I just want to just say our hearts go out to Mr. Dave Gins. He lost his wife, Patsy, and kind of a shock to their whole family. Really sad. Of course, anytime you lose somebody you love so much. She's been a staple in the ice fishing industry. Big support to him, and without support, it's hard to do what we do on a daily basis. So, Dave, we're thinking about you, and we care a lot about you. So just a little shout out to Dave. But thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Excited to be on this side of the table, chatting about everything outdoors, and we're excited to have another podcast. But I often get asked the question when I pick somebody up at the dock. There's two questions that fishing guides get asked a lot. The first one is, well, there's three. The first one is they want to feel you out if they don't know who you are. How long have you been doing this? That is probably the number one question, and it's such a common question. I can read people pretty good, and I at first I used to have to flex my muscle when I was 18, 19 years old and be like, this and this and this. I'm pro staff here, and now it's, this is my second trip. Well, my last trip we didn't catch anything, so I kind of hope that this one goes better. So it's always fun to see people's reaction, and then I think they kind of puts them at ease. The other one is do you own this boat? Those are the two most common questions.
Really?
How long have you been doing this? And do you own this boat? And I know all my friends at Randall State Bank own this boat, but yes, this is my boat. And then once the barriers are broken down, I get asked, how long have you been doing this? And it's great, a great camaraderie, and I kind of have my elevator speech because people enjoy getting to know who you're sharing the boat with. And it's crazy as a fishing guide, the lifelong relationships that I've built just from a day fishing with people. And I think that's what's so captivating about fishing is the emotions that come along with it. You go out in this lake or this ice, and you spend some time with somebody you don't know, and then all of a sudden you share this memory. And that's our job as fishing guides is sharing memories and creating memories. And that's probably why I've been doing it so long. But where did it start? I was 14 years old. I had a dad that took us fishing. Not a bunch, but we went fishing, and we didn't have a ton of money growing up. So we didn't go on a bunch of trips or live on a lake or anything like this. But I always loved fishing. I grew up watching fishing shows and watching, heroes like the Linders and Dan Sura and Doug Stange. Those guys, they were people on television that I wanted to experience the same thing that they did. And so I kind of fell in love there. And then there was an opening at my first job was working at Burger King, and then there was an opening at a bait store called Blue Water Bait and Sports, and somebody who's still a friend of mine, Tim Falk, owned it, and Tim hired me on as a young buck, and I was bagging minnows at 15 years old. I just got the job at 15. I couldn't drive, and he hired me on that summer, and that's where I learned how to really talk to people and learn how to sell lures. And because people would come in, I figured out at a young age, the fishing industry is really built on taking away insecurity when people are going fishing. They want to have belief that they're going to have success. And when they have belief, that excitement level goes up more. And I enjoyed that psychology even at that young age. And I built relationships with John and Dwayne Peterson at Northland Tackle. John Crane worked there, and they would come in and they would pamper us a little bit because they know that we could push tackle. Same thing with Mark Wendell's. Mark Wendell's a pioneer in the musky world. Crazy how I was able to build a relationship with one of the pioneers of musky fishing and figure eights and so on. And I built a relationship so much at that young age that he got to take me fishing. So he influenced me so much. I went up to Lake of the Woods with a guy that had spent thousands and thousands and thousands of hours on that lake. And so the passion continued to grow at a young age. Little did I know that Mark had a daughter, and he wanted me to meet his daughter because he liked me so much. But that never worked out or anything like that. But there's always an intent behind it. But Mark was a huge part of the passion that was built, and a tremendous man, just a faith-based, great human being, right? And then a guy by the name of Al Kendall with Can Catch Tackle. Al, old-time fisherman. I remember the first time fishing with him. He had a Zepco 202 with 10-pound test line, and at that age, I always thought that you had to have like the best of the best equipment, but he would use his little hair jigs, right? And he would troll at like 1.1 miles an hour snap jigging, and that's the guy that taught me how to snap jig. And I'd remember just catching walleye after walleye, opening my eyes to boy, the priority is learning how to fish before your equipment. So that
right.
So many different people along the way really influenced my passion for fishing. And then at the age of like 16. My dad would drop me off the boat access with our old Alumacrap back troller. I remember red boat with this Evinrude old motor, and I would say, "Dad, pick me up at the dock when I was done." And usually I was late. We didn't have cell phones back then. I always remember him being at the access, and then I did my first guide trip. And it was so funny. I took these gentlemen, and I remember like it was yesterday. These guys were big guys, and I had my little 16-foot boat with I think it was a 25 horsepower Evinrude back troller, and these guys were big. I mean, big, 3 of them, and they wanted to go musky fishing, right?
Oh boy!
And I got my little introduction to fish guiding that day. And I remember I couldn't get the boat up on plane. So here I'm cruising across Plantagenet with 3 giant men in my boat.
Oh,
right?
man.
And when I say giant, I mean giant. Like,
oh, man.
And so and that was what started the guiding. And I continued. Guys would come into the bait shop and they'd want to go fishing. And because they were seeing the big fish that we were catching on our own, the fish photos and this and that.
Sure.
And so it grew from there. And I learned at a young age working with Northland Tackle and Al Kendall and Mark Wendell's and these guys we were just talking about it, Andrew, before the podcast is as young anglers, if you're watching this and you want to get in the fishing industry, you have to become valuable to companies that you're working with. Just because you're good at fishing doesn't mean you're valuable to them, right? So I learned how to take photographs, and I learned how to promote through articles, and it really grew from there. And I was growing up. I was in Bemidji at that time, and I had the opportunity to really take my fishing career to another level, my fishing media career to another level with moving down to the Brainerd area where we are now, work with the Linder Media Group and Jeremy Smith and Jason Lund and that crew. And we started our own little media company, and it was a great experience. I learned so much from those guys, and from there I kind of broke off on my own and started really taking my fishing career to the next level. I met a great man, Mr. David Osborne, owner of Clam Outdoors, who was another great mentor of mine. Just really, really fabulous mentor. And I grew a relationship with David and became a part of the marketing, field marketing team with Clam. And we started our own television show. My brother Joe at that time was producing got into the media stuff as well, which was really cool. And Joe and I started our own media company called Raw Fish Creative Group. And at that time we were off and running full bore, making outdoor media, and I started a guide service all in that meantime. Actually, a little bit before that, with my good friend Toby Kowalibog and Steve Olson, and boy, we've grown that to I think 7 full-time fishing guides now.
Amazing,
and it's been a fun journey, and now we're sitting here. We have ABO Outfitters. I have my Jeff Andersen Fishing. We have Raw Fish Creative Group. We have Leisure Outdoor Adventures. So many great things. And in all that time, I had a company called Big Two Tackle Company that I started grassroots with a good friend of mine, Josh Craigthorpe. And I ended up selling that to Clam, and they have it now, and it's been just a blessing of mine. So it's been a fun journey, and I'm sure I forgot some of that along the way, but it's been a fun journey. The fishing has been really amazing for me, just to see where it's taken me, and the relationships that we had a mom. I could go so many different directions with this, but we had a mom that taught us at a young age that relationships are probably the most important part in life, because things come and go, and when you build positive relationships, you can learn so much from people, and that's really what she truly believed, and I think that's what allowed me to be able to meet and generally have relationships with influential people. That's an important part to whatever business you're in. Have a mentor, have somebody you can lean on, have somebody you can talk to, somebody that's been there, experienced it, somebody not necessarily for financial opportunities, just to learn from. And it's amazing the scale that can go from there. So that was a huge part. And, I'm sure there was a lot of people along the way that I didn't talk about in there, but I can tell you that those guys like Mark Wendells and Tim Falk, Keith Dahl was another one. He was a manager at Blue Water Bait, and he works at Reed Sport Shops now in Walker. And Keith used to take me fishing as a young buck, taught me how to live bait rig. Like, I remember that like it was yesterday. And I saw Keith working the St. Paul Ice Show this year, and it was like, man, like you haven't seen a brother in forever. And we sat there and talked in this craziness for 10, 15 minutes, just getting caught up. And he was a huge part of my life and my upbringing. Taught me a lot about just working at a bait shop.
Sure.
Genuinely awesome person, and probably one of the best fishermen I know. And it's somebody you don't hear about a lot, Right. I've said this before. Some of the best anglers I know are people that have like zero social media stuff, and he's really, really good. Yeah,
that's amazing. Yeah, there's so many takeaways from that, Jeff. And that's, with our team here at ABO Outfitters, you mentioned a lot about your family and your connections, and that's a huge part of why we started ABO Outfitters, right? And I think that the thing that really is the most amazing to me about you being a personality in the outdoor industry is the passion that you can see that you have for fishing. And it's so visible in everything that we do and in the videos that you produce. It's raw, it's passionate, and you can tell that you truly love the sport, and you love the people that you connect to the sport and the people that you're fishing with. I've experienced that directly myself on a few trips that we've gone on. Matt, Joe, we're all a part of that, and that I think is what is the most amazing thing about what it is that you do. Not only are you an amazing angler, but you're ultra passionate. You're really good at what you do, and you're just a great advocate for the sport. So,
thank you.
It's fun to talk with you about it.
Right on.
So we obviously talking a little bit about ABO. Outfitters. We always, in these podcasts, like to do just kind of a quick update about what's going on at ABO, recent trips, any plans, things we have going on. I know on the ice fishing side of things here recently, actually we planned to do this podcast a few weeks ago, but just we're all busy with normal work schedules and other things, busy things going on. Our hockey season just wrapped up here. But just a few weeks ago, Jeff and Joe came back. You guys just came back from a quick grinder ice fishing trip up on Lake of the Woods. So how did that go? Yeah,
before we get into that, we talk about ABO, and we want to continue. You got to hear my little history and about relationships, and we have roundtable discussions all the time about outfitters and what we want to do with this company and where we want to take ABO Outfitters, we always come back, and so people that are listening, we always come back to building a community of people that love the outdoors. I want to, we want to put a business, when you're listening to this, we want to put a business behind this, because that's an important part of it. But more importantly, we want to put a bunch of passionate people together.
Right.
And network together and be together. And that's why we're doing these podcasts and this and that. And we're going to continue to do more events. And so we just join you to come along and be a part of what we're doing. This ABO Outfitters is not about us individuals.
Right.
We're the drivers behind it. But really, it's about the outdoor community, and it's important for people to understand that part of what we're doing.
Right.
It's where we're not just trying to sell you something or this and that. We're passionate about the outdoors. We're going to talk about the products that we believe in that help us have more success. But I can't tell you how navigating my way through the fishing industry where I'm a great salesman, and I think it's because I'm not trying to push people on product. I'm just trying to educate them. And when we educate, it's much easier to be able to sell that product, right? And that's part of my job. I get paid to promote these companies and to use these companies. But the longevity, I'm 40 now, it has been because I talk about the products I believe in. And we really want ABO Outfitters to be a resource for people to come, be a part of what we're doing, be part of this community, and learn from. I mean, we had Mike Wilson in here talking about his style of fishing and his style of hunting, and we had you talking about trail cams, and for me, I'm just absorbing all that, and we want to grow that in masses. So if you're watching, come along and be a part of this journey. Like that's
absolutely.
I'm so excited about that part of what we're doing here, and we're just getting started. That's the fun part. So
yeah.
So recent trips, Joe and I, we had a turn and burn. I got a call from my buddy Jean Paul. He said I got a couple of days off. He's been grinding up there. He goes, I got a couple of days off. You want to come up fishing and just for a fun fishing trip? And we had some photos we had to get, but not this huge media. A lot of times when I go fishing, it's like we have this long laundry list of media agenda. And Joe and I, in the grinder season, we were like, yeah, let's just go fishing. So I invited my father-in-law, Todd Clark, to come with, and it was great to have him with. And he caught actually a couple of the biggest crappies of the whole trip. And so we got up there, and we just had beautiful weather, beautiful lake conditions. And one of my favorite things to do is to get on that lake and get on the snowmobiles and just go for a stinking rip.
Yeah.
It is so stinking fun. It was chilly in the morning. I can't remember. It was probably, 15 below without the chill. And it was cold, but then the sun came out and it was fairly calm, south little breeze. And we snuck behind some islands and we drilled a bunch of holes, and I wouldn't say the crappie fishing was lights out. I think the crappie population is probably down up there a little bit, but still you can go up there and just have a blast, And I find it funny. This is how my personality is. We have this couple main holes or spots where the crappies are, and we drilled a couple holes, and it wasn't like lights out. So I'm off.
Yeah,
trying to find other fish, exploring, and meanwhile these guys are catching them fairly good. And Joe caught a couple giants, and Todd caught a couple giants, and JP caught a couple. It was really fun. I come back, and I thought I was going to find the mother lode, but I didn't. But that's the fun part. Is usually I can do that. And I would say it usually the spoon, the 16th ounce blade spoon is really the ticket. But it was interesting how we dropped down to the tungsten, and that was a big part to our success, is just dropping down to a little bit of tungsten jig, and I was getting them to bite. And I don't know if it was because, the time of year or what it was, but they weren't absolutely just crushing the baits. But then we one spot, I don't know, it's probably about 15 miles from where we launch. And then we drove 15 miles back to a spot that's like where I filmed one of my first trips up there, and we crushed them. Wasn't very good. And then we had another spot 15 miles away from there on the other end, and we went there, and it was really good fishing.
Nice.
We really ended up on a good trip, and so on a good day trip. And then JP had to work the next morning, and Todd did. So Joe and I were like, holy criminy, we're up here, so let's go walleye fishing. And all we had heard about was on Lake of the Woods how many fish houses were out there, and how many wheelhouses and rental houses and this and that. We just got on the snowmobile trail, and we just went to an area up north, and we found a section that had zero activity, like maybe a couple of houses on the main part of the rock, but there were several reefs that hadn't been drilled on. Wow. And so we went to one of my favorite ones, and small little one, and we drilled, and Joe and I just put the smack down on the walleyes, like absolute smack down. It was pretty fun. I know we were sending you guys text.
We were getting pictures, Snapchats. Yeah.
And we didn't catch, a bunch of big ones, but man, it's just, it shows how important, if you can have those good days in the permanent house, but if you really want to have those epic days consistently, mobility is such a key, because especially on a lake like Lake of the Woods with Red Lake getting all the slush and this and that, all the houses coming up, and it's great to see the excitement for fishing, but it makes it harder to have really those big days, right?
Yeah.
And so it just shows how important it is to be able to be mobile and get away. And usually that's part of the battle is fishing areas that haven't been touched. And it was fun to pull up on these reefs and put the hammer down on them. So
yeah, it was funny, because that's why our podcast got delayed back, and you guys were putting the smack down on those walleyes, and it was fun to see those pictures come in. And I know we're just like anybody else, right? We get the itch to get out and set the hook a few times. I tell my wife Abby that I need some screen time, in front of the graph.
Yeah.
But it's just fun to have a day like that. It was kind of a long winter for us. We didn't really get to get out that much, for a lot of our, ice fishing trips, I guess. So it's nice that you guys were able to get out and crack them. That's awesome.
Yeah, it felt good. And like for Joe, he's always dealing with cold fingers and frozen batteries. And if you want a challenging thing, be a cameraman in the ice fishing world. Like, it's as hard as it gets. And so I just told Joe, I'm like, leave the camera and we can maybe take a few still shots, but we're gonna just go set the hook, and it was good. It was refreshing. It was fun. It's healthy to do that, and so mentally healthy for everybody. And so refreshed. And I'm telling you, talk about ripping. That's two different things. Like, you're up on Lake of the Woods and you're driving in powder and slush spots and this and that up in the Canadian side, going by these beautiful rock cliffs. And then you get on the south shore of Lake of the Woods and you have this beautiful snowmobile groom trail. And you can just get on there and you got your clam in the back and you just go wide open. It's so cool. Like, it's an experience that I encourage everybody to go explore.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when you guys were down or had come back from ice fishing, Matt and I made a trip to the other side of the U.S., and we actually had a work trip there, but we were able to get out and charter a boat for the day. Met a really cool guy, now a good friend of ABO, Keith Santucci, and he took us out to do a little inshore fishing, and that was something that was new to me. I think
new to me as well.
New to Matt as well. And so we brought, obviously, at ABO Outfitters, we sell Svartsanker tackle, so we brought down some Svartsanker tackle, our 3-inch paddle tails, 4-inch tails, and some 5-inchers, just to kind of explore and do a little bit of that, see how it went. And man, we just had an absolute blast. The sea trout, which really for me was really similar to walleye fishing. Spring walleye fishing, we would set up on these grass beds, in like 6 feet, just pitch our jigs up into 4 feet and just kind of snap it back. And they were just absolutely chowing the Schwarzanker baits, and that was fun to see. For one thing, just because the fishing technique was very similar to what we're used to for bass and walleyes up here. But it was also just fun to see the Schwarzanker tackle working well down there. We had a really good time with that. We caught a bunch of other fish species as well, but it was nice to get a little fun in the sun. We all got fried, even though we did our best with our sun hoodies and everything else. After 4 months of Minnesota winter, we had little pockets of exposure that got fried. And then after the week after that, I was able to go out and actually took a family trip / work trip to Puerto Rico and got to hook up with snook first and then also some tarpon. And man, I have got the bug now for some saltwater tarpon fishing. That was incredible. I mean, I've done a lot of steelhead fishing, which to me has probably been pound for pound the most just outstanding fish as far as performance when you hook up. And then I hooked up with the tarpon, and it was just like, wow, it is thunder and lightning instantly, and it was fun. So I know some of you that listen to this, or anyone else that does, have done tarpon fishing, either fly rod or not. I know that you can share this experience with me, but I definitely want to go and explore that fish a little bit more. That was a pretty special experience. So
yeah, it sounds that's on my bucket list for sure. I've watched Larry Dahlberg on some of his trips and catching him casting like that. Yeah,
it's just unbelievable. I mean, they can just explode. And I mean, saltwater fish in general have that ability, but man, they are just incredible. You hook up with a 6, 7, 8 foot tarpon, and they're gone. It's like nothing I've ever experienced before. So looking forward to exploring that. And there are a lot of guys. I was using our 5-inch paddle tail. And that's how I made all of my hookups. And we have some guys that are kind of a part of the ABO Outfitters team that use the 6 and 7 inch paddle, or excuse me, the 6 and 8 inch paddle tails, and have a lot of success with that down there as well. So I'm kind of curious to try some of that out as well, using almost the pike and musky baits that we sell up here, and checking out how that performs down there as well.
Yeah, it's amazing that the action of that stinking paddle tail that Klaus has made, like it's really you talk about lures and selling lures and this and that, but man, like I saw it for firsthand when Joe and I took a trip up to Scott Lake Lodge, and you would think on like the main body of Scott, it gets fished every day by the guys, right? And they have these resident pike that probably get fished every day, and they're up super shallow. And of course, they have all these other amazing lakes that they fly out to that don't get touched at all or pristine, right?
Right.
There's giant pike in Scott Lake, and I remember fishing with Matt Cornell, and this was my first real experience with the McRubber paddle tail as a pike lure, and I brought it up, and we had gone into this bay, and Matt knew that these fish were in there. He knew that there's big ones in there, and it was like you could see we were fishing through these spots, and it was just like whatever. And then before we pulled up to the spot, we have this all on film, right? And he was like a whole different intensity for Matt. Like, don't screw this up, right? Yeah. Like, and so I casted the McRubber out, and I think I caught 2 or 3 master angler pike over 40 inches, not sight fishing them, just casting because he didn't want to blow up into this bay. And I could see the expression on his face, like, holy crap, like that's a powerful lure. Like, yeah, you just tricked probably the 3 biggest pike in this whole bay that get fished every single day into biting this lure. And it was like that for the whole trip, where these fish were just eating this bait. There's something really special about it. Same thing goes for Joe and our good buddy Blake LaFleur and that team. They go up to a lake called Campbell Lake, and they go up, and it's the same thing. And Blake is about as in tune when it comes to in tune. I don't know if that's quick. He's about as anal as it comes to lure selection because he's so good, and that's what makes good anglers, right? And he called me when he got back, and he said, if you ain't throwing a McRubber, you ain't fishing up here. Like, that is how powerful that lure is for just pike and for muskies. We see it at times muskie fishing as well. So like on Mille Lacs, that the big muskies that are eating that bait, it's just, there's something unique and special about it. It's not the end all be all everything, but it's something that you should have in your tackle box, and guys on saltwater are catching them with it too. So
yeah, that's
really
fun.
cool.
Joe posted a video yesterday of Blake and some friends up on Campbell, putting the smack down on absolutely monster pike. And granted, that's obviously the nature of fishing in that area, but it's fun to see that. And we try not to get too salesy with this stuff during the podcast, or just in general with what we are at ABO Outfitters, because that's not what we're about. But it's fun to see that lure be as successful as it's been, with the diversity of species and locations and where it's used. So
again, if you're listening to this or if you're watching our videos, the great thing about it being a little salesy is if they use it, they're going to be coming back and saying,
it works.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it works. Thank you. That's the fun part about doing what we do, is we know that if you put that thing in your tackle box and you rig it correctly and you fish it correctly, you're going to have success with it. So it's really easy.
Yep, absolutely. So I'd like to, the thing about having a guy like you, Jeff, on the podcast is that when it comes to fishing, there are so many topics that we can jump into. And if you guys are listening to this podcast, feel free to comment on this and let us know what you'd like us to ask Jeff about in future podcasts, because this will be one of several podcasts that we'll have with Jeff coming up to open water season. I'm sure we'll chat walleye fishing, and definitely we'll chat musky fishing before you spend too much time up north. But what we wanted to kind of dive into and get your thoughts on today was you do a lot of March and April ice fishing up north of the border. And obviously for us down here in Minnesota, the ice fishing season kind of starts to wind down now. It's always kind of seasonal. But after the walleye season, all the houses come off the lakes, and you just kind of start to see a taper of fishing activity, fishing interest. But right now is really when things start to pick up and get fun north of the border. So I would love to have you talk a little bit about that. First of all, as you head north, where do you like to go, and what's your favorite type of fish to target when you go up there?
Yeah, it's interesting, the psychology that you talk about with it winding down. I look at it as like, here's our opportunity, right? Less anglers, more opportunity. And some of the best fishing we have, though we can't fish for walleyes and pike here in the Minnesota side, except for on border waters, it's a great time to go catch perch and crappies and all those fish. So the fishing action is really good right now. The snow is melting off the lake. It creates oxygen in the water. The fish are moving shallow, getting ready for their spring migration and everything else. So it's a great time to go ice fishing, so I know we all have open water in our mind. We get a little sun in our skin and this and that. And like you said, I cannot wait to get in the boat, So yeah. And I think it's good, where I haven't been grinding away in the super cold weather. Ice fishing this year hasn't been, with the slush and everything we've dealt with. So, So I am primed up. I'm excited to go ice fishing. And one of the things that gets me really excited is there's a couple of bites that are really fun, that I'll be looking forward to. Lake trout is probably the number one, right? And you're seeing more and more anglers target lake trout, and
yes,
and it's just because it's such a powerful, fast moving fish. And this time of year is great. They really get in big pods, and so you can catch multiple fish on a reef or in a hole, or on a steep edge at a time once you find those big pods. And there's two places I really like to go chase lake trout. One is my good buddy Vic and Dot's Resort, Robert Tolene, a wonderful guy, and he's just been rocking. I would really like to take my son Gavin. He's a hockey player, and he just finished up his last year Squirts and go Warriors, and he loves to fish, and so I'd love to take him on a lake trout trip. He's been talking about it, and I can you imagine seeing that rugrat hooked
Yeah,
up with a couple lake trout? It's going to be so fun. So I'm trying to pull that together. And then I'd also like to go on a more hardcore trip up in Manitoba and try to catch, a 40-incher, like we did way back in the day up on Clearwater, and go chase some big ones. Jean-Paul Tessier, my good buddy, he goes on a trip up northern Manitoba, and a big group of guides, all fishing guides up in the Northwest Angle, great dudes. They're out going up there. I might even try to snaggle my way in with those guys. So though that's on the list, the hit list. I'd also like to make a couple-day run up and fish big pike. I haven't done that for a couple of years now, just because our March has been so busy. Go up there and do that. We have we have a little media shoot with the team at Clam Outdoors coming up here on Leech Lake, so that's going to tie up a weekend, which will be really fun. Bunch of great pros and everything else, and we'll be rocking photos and videos and everything else. So that's on the list.
So when you go up, if lake trout fishing, if you're going up, to Lake of the Woods or further north, when is kind of that target time frame that you're looking at that and saying, all right, now is a good time to go? Is it weather related, or is it just more enjoyable as it gets later to be on the ice, popping around fishing?
Yeah, I think, anytime in March, you get a little bit longer days, it suns up a little bit longer, you get that ice melt a little bit, and those fish, like I said, there's not like a significant weather change. I just think it's the time the sun is up. I think the fish can feel that, and they just start podding up in tighter pods. It is more enjoyable to be out when it's not 10 below out, but really with the gear now, ice armor and everything else, you can pretty much fish in any weather, especially lake trout fishing. I have to be as finesse where you can wear gloves. And I know when I was on Clearwater with Joe and Bernie, when we filmed the Across the Ice Belt episode, it was brutal cold, like really, really cold, like full gloves on the whole time and everything else. But we fished outside the whole time, just because filming, it's almost nearly impossible to have a really good show, because you're kind of stuck in one spot once you bring the cameras in the thing. So
right.
We always put priority over catching fish over being comfortable. And so we would stay out in that cold and bounce around to different spots. And so yes, March is a little bit more enjoyable, and it allows us to fish outside and everything else. So I would say this year more than ever, if you're listening to this, I'd say ice conditions are got to be a concern for everybody. It sounds like the ice conditions are up north are great, but I would bet that there's a lot of moisture in the ground and a lot of snow up there, so that means there's a lot more current, and Lake of the Woods has a ton of current. So I would be really careful of some of those current areas up there, especially lake trout fishing, where normally they're frozen really good this time of year. They're probably not. So have your nebulous on your machines, and just use that as a caution, especially on Lake of the Woods.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, is kind of what that timeline you think typically looks like for somebody that wants to make I think for a lot of people that talk to me about ice fishing, specifically lake trout fishing, that are interested in do it, maybe don't realize the opportunities that are relatively close depending on where you're at. Obviously we're in kind of central Minnesota here, but talk about that and your experience. You mentioned Vic and Dotson Lake of the Woods. You guys have caught a lot of really nice fish up there with Robert Toline, and it's really, not a big commitment. You can make that into kind of a weekend grinder trip if you wanted to.
Yep. That's spot on. Like it's an easy trip. And if you want to catch crappies, you can do that. If you want to catch wallies, you can do that. And one thing that we haven't really covered is the perch fishing up there. The perch fishing's been really good up there the past few years. And we haven't talked much about that at all, or even shown much of that, but it's really good. Robert is, I don't know if we can take any credit for this, but I'd like to take a little bit. Robert is booked so solid because, number one, he's such a great guy. Number two, he has a great facility. Number three, he has some of the best fishing right out his back door.
Sure.
And so that's a combination of success. And the guy works his tail off, and he's a great guy. So that's why he's busy.
So when you're making these trips up this time of year, what is the stuff that you make sure is in the bag when you're going up? Talking about rods, tackle, and obviously I know you like to use the Humminbird, the Helix units. So talk a little bit through that and what's the must-have gear when you make that trip.
Yeah, so I must have. We always try to say safety first, right? So I'm trying to wear my ice armor float suit, or I have the nebulous with. That's an important factor, just because you're dealing with ice conditions, right? I have some type of throwable thing, so I always try to make sure to have that stuff packed, and then of course you got to have the leech flutter spoon. That's a must have for lake trout fishing. It's just, there's something special about it. My favorite big fish lake trout spoon or presentation is a 4-inch fluke. Zoom is a great one. I've used that a lot, and actually Bernie Keefe has made me a couple of his custom jigs with really high end hooks, and I use that, and I seem to get really big bites on that presentation. I would say more action on the spoon, but my really big bites come from just because they eat smelt, so much.
Right.
And then rods really vary depending on where I'm fishing. I really like that Ice Team Professional Series rod for Lake of the Woods. It's a fun rod. It fishes well. It's light. Most of the fish we catch up there are like 6 to 8 pounder, sometimes a 10, sometimes a 12, but more times than not, they're those 6 to 8 pounders that are super spunky and super fun. And it's really fun on that rod. So
sure.
Other key factors, I do fish Humminbird for my electronics, a great unit, especially in that deep water. You can really zone in. And the nice thing about that is whether I'm fishing lake trout or even crappies, the variable zoom, like, that has been such a huge feature for me. So I can just, with a push of a button, I can move that zoom to any part of the water column, and on other electronics, you either got the bottom 6 foot or the bottom 12 foot. A lot of times as the season progresses, actually these fish rise up and they're sitting right underneath the ice, so being able to zoom right underneath the ice is a really key feature for me in my electronics. So
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Just to talk about that, I'm going to pull up a video here because this is a nice little transition.
Yeah, right on.
Of you. This is actually at Vic and Dodd's campus. I snagged this off of Jeff Andersen Fishing here on YouTube, and I'm just going to kind of play this through here, and we'll overlay this if you're watching on YouTube. But this is Jeff catching a lake trout here.
And then all of a sudden you drop down and Robert caught a really nice one. So Whitefish Bay, I'm going to catch this fish, I think. Eat it. Oh, he bumped it.
A little swing and a miss, but that's...
Ooh, he got 2 on the screen. That's a good thing. This one's going to eat it. Hooked up.
Oh my gosh, is that fun?
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes you want to be on the ice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that just looks,
Let's go. Let's pack up the sleds and go.
The sun is shining. Little frost on the face mask there.
Back to your point of weather. That was single digits that trip.
Yeah. But you layer up and you wear the right gear, you're good to go. There's Scott, great angler, great friend. Look at the head shakes. That's so fun.
Yeah, and
this is not a big one, I don't believe. I don't even remember, but
yeah, this is a smaller fish. But I mean, look at this thing play out. You don't have too many fights like this.
And we on this spot we caught, I don't know, 5 or 6 of them. Was it? Maybe even more than that.
I think so.
Yeah, it's a cool shot of them doing their head shakes under there.
Yeah.
They are a neat fish. Really neat fish.
Oh, there's the air bubbles. We know it's a trout.
Yeah, I talk about the air bubbles. They're one of the only fish that can adjust. Look at how tiny that thing is.
Yeah.
That's a tiny lake trout. Perfect one to eat if you're to eat one. But, man,
Look at that fight.
it just shows how hard they fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, for that video, just talking through what you're talking about with the graph, and that there's a lot of details that I would love to grill you on when it comes to how you utilize your graph specifically for ice fishing. I know that the summer fishing is a whole nother discussion, but in that scenario right there, talking about your zoom level, when that fish comes into the graph, reading the intensity of the fish as it comes up. One of the things I notice a lot about you is your jigging cadence always tends to be, and maybe this is because it's always during hookups with fish, but it always tends to be way more aggressive than what I would typically use or I see other people using. So a lot of points there I just talked about, but walk us through a little bit of that.
Yeah, so I call that the trigger factor, when I'm talking with people. And the trigger factor is really important. One of the things I've seen, people ice fishing is when they're with me, they're fishing, they're being aggressive with their jig while nothing's there, right? And then all of a sudden a fish shows up, and what do? They stop, right?
Sure.
And I always ask them, how often does a fish or a bait fish stop when it's getting chased by a predatory fish? Never.
Right.
A bait fish isn't going to stop and say, eat me, right? And so the difference from getting them to really just kind of nip it and really eat it good, you can see in that one actually, I probably didn't move it away fast enough where that smaller one just kind of nipped it and I rolled it, right? And then I went even more aggressive. It came back and pulled it away and it ate it really good, right?
Yeah.
And so, we learned this through crappie fishing and through musky fishing, really in the figure eight is learning how to trigger that cat and mouse instinct, And so I always talk about the scenario of where you throw a fluff ball out for a cat and it kind of pounces close to it. And if you just let it sit there, it just kind of stares at it and eventually loses interest, right? And now you pull it away a little bit, then it pounces closer. You pull it away again, and you pull it away again, and then it eventually just jumps on it, and attacks. And our job as anglers is to trigger that attack mode with those fish. And one of the first things that I'm trying to figure out, whether I'm walleye fishing or crappie fishing or even lake trout fishing, is trying to figure out what that bite ceiling, how far are the fish willing to travel, and it's different for each scenario. And then I know when I'm paying attention to that, then I know how aggressive I can get and my strike zone where I have to get them to bite and find my finishing move, right? So we have the attraction phase, we have the close the distance phase, then we have the finish, right? And so I have to figure all those things out. So let's say, I'm fishing crappies on 34 feet and the fish are willing to go up, into that 22-foot range. If that's all the higher they're willing to go, I have to make them bite before I get to that 22-foot range. They're not willing to travel. Sometimes it's a thermocline, not a thermocline thing, or just a water oxygen thing, whatever it might be, right?
Right.
And so that's how my mind is thinking, right? And I enjoy the aggressive nature side of things. And the reason you see me aggressive is I've seen how fast and how hard fish can eat through fishing jigging wraps in the summertime. We're using 7-foot rods, and you're pitching this 3/4 ounce jigging wrap that's essentially just a rock.
Right.
And you're ripping it up 6 feet at a time, and those fish are eating it instantly as you're moving it as fast as you can. So fish can eat and swim way faster than you think.
Right.
But there's a nuance to it, and you have to really pay attention to what you did with that lure is the reason you caught that fish. When fish are really chowing and on the feed, anybody can catch them, right?
Right.
But when they're in that kind of neutral to negative mode, it's what you do with that lure every time is why you hook up with a fish. So that's an important thing to figure out as an angler. And there's a lot that goes into it, and I could probably talk about 2 hours about this, but you have to learn what your lure is doing when you're jigging it. You have to intimately know what your lure is doing with each jig stroke, right? And you can learn that by just watching it in the water or whatever it may. I used to fill a 6-gallon pail of bucket, and I would just use different combinations and really look at how those lures move in the water and what they do. And same thing goes with a bucktail or a jig and a minnow or whatever it might be. If you're using a plastic, you can rip it much harder than you can with like a jig and a minnow. So those little nuances all are a huge factor. And probably one of my favorite parts of fishing is number one, finding fish, going out and zigging when everybody's zagging, right? I enjoy that part of the fact of fishing, but I also enjoy the aggressive nature of it, and really getting fish to move and eat fast and everything else. It's a fun deal. And so you talk about the nuance, and then you talk about pike fishing this time of year, which is one of my favorite things. And I've learned that over the years, where I used to bring these rattle baits, and I used to bring these secret plastic baits and this and that, and spoons, and I would jig aggressively and this and that. And And I'm like, I'm going to catch the biggest pike in the world on these aggressive baits because that's how aggressive pike are in the warm weather. Pike are lazy and dumb, and they just want this hot dog of a meal.
Yeah,
Smelt, stinky thing, just sitting there, and just they want it slow and steady, and that's really what catches the biggest ones. And one of my favorite things to do is go set a series of flags out, sit on the ice with the boys, put sunscreen on. That this time of year, that's another key thing, is have sunscreen, because that sun is so intense this time of year. I've had my worst sunburns from this time of year because we haven't seen much sun except for the lucky guys that are in Puerto Rico or wherever else. We haven't seen much sun, and so it's amazing. I've seen blisters from guys that don't take care of their skin. But I was setting flags and just hanging out and watching flags and yelling flag when a flag goes up and catching some giant pike, huge pike.
Fun stuff. I wanted to go back. When you were talking about, that was a really interesting piece there for me, at least, talking about the strike zone and gauging that intensity of the fish. So when you're kind of playing with that zone initially, will you kind of test, in those first few fish that come in, how aggressive they are? So you'll kind of see, all right, at what point are they turning away, even if it means, you're losing the first fish or two that comes into the graph, or are you able to just kind of read that, or will you actually say, all right, I'm going to see at what point this fish turns away and I lose him, and then I'm going to go back and try and get him back, and like you said, I know I gotta get him to commit here before 20 feet or 22 feet, whatever that number is.
Yeah, it's a trial and error thing. If I start seeing fish turn off, or lose interest at a certain depth, I just make a mental note of it. And to the opposite side of that, it's also important to pay attention to all those small little things. When we went up to Clearwater, I caught 2 fish over 40 inches. One that was a dream fish for me. I dreamed about it my whole life, and crazy emotion, just this big, giant lake trout. And it was Joel, what was it, 18-minute battle? 18-minute battle. We went through 2 camera batteries and about 3 huge snow squalls after I hooked up. An 18-minute fight is so long. And I'd been dreaming about this fish my whole life, right? A big, huge, giant, over 40-inch, lake trout through the ice. But I had figured out that these big ones wanted to eat it on the fall instead of eating it coming up. That's how I was getting them to bite. It was amazing. And I caught a couple 38 inchers, which were big, giant ones as well. But I had figured out that just by testing, I remember I'm going to let this thing free fall and see if they'll eat it. And that's what I do. I'd get them to come up all the way right underneath the ice. And then there was something to it. I would just let it free fall, and you could see my bail wide open, and I could see on my graph, and I could see my line stop. And I closed my bail, and it was just like a circle hook set where on this really big giant one, I just closed my bail and it was on because it was running with it. It ate it on a free fall. This 3/4 ounce big lead head jig and a white fluke ate it on a free fall. And I remember it like it was yesterday. And I remember just I was eating a sandwich, and I closed my bail. It was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a huge sunny day, but then the snow would come, and just really cool day, like in middle of nowhere. I mean, if we would have broke down, we would have been stuck forever, right? Yeah. Except for this old log cabin that we had found in the woods. But I was always trying to find the safety net. But the whole essence of that. So that's really the trigger factor. That's what it's all about. Is learning those small little things that really get those fish to eat, and to think of a 30-pounder, however big this lake trout was, I don't know, right? It was just a big fat one, eating this bait that must have been going 5 miles an hour straight down, free open bail, just falling as fast as it can, and watching it instead of tailing down on this thing and just like going down, and it must have just like wanted to just eat it, close the bail, and just hang on. And like I said, straight 18-minute battle. Like, wow, as
unbelievable.
And I remember this fish. I was just like, my arm was burnt, like it was, and the intensity of the cold and this and that, and like I said, Joe had to change a camera battery mid-flight, like, and then coming up the hole, seeing the air bubbles, like coming up the hole, like to me, I can relive that whole thing. Yeah, like it's as good as it gets.
That is amazing, and I think that's kind of what I'm getting at with your ability to read the graph, read the fish, and seal the deal, because the difference between you icing a 40-inch lake trout and not is your ability to read that situation you remembered from a previous, hey, I'm going to let this free fall, and it picks it up. And then also knowing how to finish on that. Like you said, it was more of a circle hook, hook set, and just the tactics, whether it's from memory for you or reading the situation, when you're in that environment, catching big fish or shooting big bucks, you have to put yourself in the place where they live, right? That's the first step. But then the second step is execution.
Yeah.
And that's where, I think your experience and what we're trying to teach everybody that's listening is how to finish on that, how to get that picture with a 40-inch lake trout in your hands, right?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to instinct. And if you want to grow your instinct, it really comes down to just doing it more. And that's what's great about outfitters, is the reality is not everybody gets to fish or hunt as much as we get to do, right? And that's where we really want to share that knowledge. Like if I want to get really good at playing hockey, I played hockey growing up, but really I want to learn from guys that lived it more, and teach my son that these are the things that it takes to become really good at something, and and to be honest with you, when I saw that thing eat like that, I didn't really know how to set. I just closed my bail and kind of set the hook like it was on like that, and it just happened to happen. But the cool part is, again, as an angler, when you're ice fishing, ask yourself and tell yourself what you did with the lure is the reason you caught that fish. When you have that mindset, I think for some it's just going through the motion. And actually, I see a lot of people like see the fish and they want to like drop their lure right down to its nose. Me, I want to hold steady and get that fish to trigger from there. There's times where you got to be ultra finesse and this and that, especially like bluegill fishing or like heavily fished crappies and this and that. You got to go ultra finesse, right?
Sure. Yep.
But there are times where like the biggest, I feel like the biggest fish in the system will be a lot more willing to chase and eat if you can get them to do that. I think that the smaller fish, if you allow them to eat, and this really holds true with perch fishing, you get on a pot of fish and you get that Christmas tree effect to come up on your graph, and all of a sudden you just catch the first one and it's an 8-incher, right? Instead, pull it away from that 8-incher, let that second mark beat it to it, and usually that's the 12, 13-incher, And so you do that, you fire that school up, and then you do that, you drop right back down, and usually that second 12 or 13-incher will eat, and I've learned that from fishing with some of the best perch fishermen, in the world. So yeah,
that's really good stuff. Well, I think that there's a technique and a tactic to it, and I had the experience to go on really my first dedicated lake trout fishing trip with you and Joe here a few years ago, and we had set a we were struggling, right, to catch fish, but we had thrown I think you had set a dead stick down, and we really we wanted to catch a big one, and I wanted to catch a big lake trout. I had caught a few lake trout before, but wanted to catch a big one. And sure enough, that dead stick just starts peeling. And it's hard, right, to control your emotion and to control your excitement. And my natural instinct was to grab the rod, that had a 40-inch Laker on it and set the hook like it was Musky at the end of the line. And of course it instantly snapped because it was scream and drag. But the being able to finish that, seal the deal on that, I think those are the tips that, it's great to hear your feedback on that, Jeff, and hopefully we can make all of us that are listening, better anglers, so we can make it happen.
Yeah, right on.
Yep. So we have, I think, run out of our Jeff question time today. Like I said, please let us know. Jeff has a lot of great information on fishing. Let us know if there's any other topics you'd like Jeff to cover, and we'll jump on that. But what we always like to finish off the podcast is our 3 common questions, Jeff. And now it's your turn to be in the hot seat. So I'm super curious about this. So let's start off with, Jeff, what is your favorite outdoor memory?
Man, I've been so blessed to have so many great memories, growing up and in the guide boat. I've had father-son trips where it's the dad's last trip, and the dad caught his biggest fish of his life with his son. on multiple occasions. I have videos of clients who are now really great friends of mine, where I stay in contact with them, where we fish for 10 years together, and the father has passed away. So many great guide trips. I've had, great memories with my brothers, and I've had great memories with my dad. I would say probably my favorite outdoor memory is, and we actually have this on my GoPro camera, is Gavin was 9 years old, and we always make an annual trip. Gavin, my son, always make an annual trip up to Lake of the Woods, and 9, and he had caught a small, like 38-incher with me, casting on his own, but we had pulled up to this little reef that we now call Gavin's Rock, and we were fishing along, kind of a rainy day. And if anybody knows Gavin, the kid is just full of questions, like wants to analyze everything. And I love every second of it. And Gavin, we had just been going through, and I was actually kind of finishing up the spot, because I had gone through the prime spot, and we were just kind of going on, and a really fishy day. And Gavin, there's a big fish behind his bucktail, this is a bucktail that he tied himself with me in the cabin.
Cool.
It's one of my traditions, is I enjoy tying my own bucktails at the cabin. It's really fun to do. And Gavin went into his figure 8, and he hooked his fish, and he fought it, and actually it was going over the rock, and I tightened his drag up a little bit, and he was just cranking on it, and the fish did this giant jump, and it jumped off, and I'm guessing it was like a 49-inch or maybe a 50-inch. It was a really big one. Jumped off, and he wasn't that bummed, actually. He just accepted it, and I think there's great life lessons with that. His opportunity came, and it was gone. Like, that's what musky fishing is. You got to just continue to push on, let it hurt for a bit, and move on. And we use that same mentality in athletics. Like with my daughter Brooke, who skates, and Gavin. You lose a game, you learn from it, and you move on. You keep pushing. We get another game the next day. So we picked it up, and we gave a great hug, and we went to the next spot. And I actually had hooked one, and on the figure 8, really cool fish catch, and I handed him the rod, and we caught it. But it was the following year where we were out fishing the day, and actually my wife was in the boat, and I had hooked a really big one on a figure 8, and Gavin was trying to handle the net, and I actually looked back at the film, and I probably put way too much pressure on this fish. It was probably like a 51-incher, and it jumped off, and those are really special fish on Lake of the Woods. It had jumped off, and we were bummed, and I was more I wanted to catch that fish really bad, right? And so we just moved on from it. We got up the next day, and I asked Gavin, what do you want to go do? And he said, I want to go musky fishing. Well, when the fish are biting up there, that they're on, right? And Gavin was casting a topwater bait, and he cast it out, and he caught like a 40-incher, super cool fish catch, and he caught it. And then the next spot we went to, I had hooked a 50-incher, and a 50.5-incher. It ended up being a big, giant, fat one, and gave a huge fight. And he did such a good job with the net, and went in the net, and just pure emotion. And it's so cool to watch the video, because it is so emotional. And for me, it was a lesson learned for Gavin. Like, bad things are going to happen.
Yep.
Like, it's part of life. And it's in business, in sports, and in school, in friendships, and everything else. There's going to be things that are negative. That's just part of what life is. But if you can learn from those things, there's things that happen that are out of control. You just keep pushing on, and that's what musky fishing has taught me. I'm sitting here thinking about all these memories are going through my mind, and Joe and I are fishing the Frank Schneider tournament. And I mean, this is the biggest tournament, and I'm ultra competitive. I want to beat everybody, right?
Yep.
In a good spirited way, but I want to win. Like, that's what drives me. I want to be the best, and I always want to catch the biggest fish, and I enjoy that. I enjoy that drive and that competition, and I had hooked the biggest muskie I've ever hooked in this tournament on the lake that we were on. And it was coming around the boat, and it did this giant jump, and Joe drove with the net, and it got hooked on the outside of the net, and off it went. It was gone. And oh my gosh, I remember driving. It was silent in the boat, and I said on the way in, I remember very specifically, I said to Joel, I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at the situation. We're going to move on from it. We're going to catch a big one, right? That Sunday of the tournament, I ended up catching, I can't remember, like a 50-something incher, and it was the second largest fish of the tournament or something like that.
Wow.
And maybe it was the first, I don't remember. And really it wasn't about the prize, because I gave the prize away to an elderly guy, a fishing rod and a reel and this and that. But it was more about trying to win, right? Mm-hmm. And so you just that's the whole point of my favorite fishing memory is for my son to be able to experience a life lesson through fishing. Like, you just keep driving. There's things that are going to happen that you can't control. And that's one thing musky fishing in this fishing game has taught me, is you can do everything perfect and it can still go bad, and that's life. You can do everything perfect, everything that you believe is perfect, and things will sometimes go bad. You just move on from it. So that was probably one of my favorite fishing memories,
That's great.
With my son that remembers that,
That's great. Yeah. And it's a cool video. You just shared a little snippet of all of that too. It's a really cool video. If any of you out there have a chance to watch it, it's really great. Okay, what product couldn't you live without?
Geez, there's so many really important ones. And it depends on scenarios and situations and everything else. But obviously, in the summertime, you got to have a boat. You got to have good electronics. I think GPS technology is so invaluable to where the knowledge that you can gain from the GPS, and really intimately understanding the rock that you're casting to, understanding to the piece of cabbage that you're casting to, and there's a lot that comes to that with side imaging, hummingbird side imaging, and the trolling motors and the polarized glasses that you got to have. But really anything that will allow me to learn the fish habitat, and there's so much that goes into that, and then the ability to fish that fish habitat in a very specific, and I'm telling you, if I'm off by 2 feet on my cast, it's hard on my personality. I got to readjust and I got to make it right, because you're out of position, you're out of this and you're out of that. Like, you got to understand what you're fishing like that.
Sure.
You're not just getting on a cabbage bed and just aimlessly throwing, you're very fishing a very specific area of course, I've really been into really good, sun protection. That's an important thing. I have my favorite is the Neutrogena stuff, comes in a yellow bottle, and I think that, like, when you get on those long musky grinders, that's a really important piece. Is when you get back at the dock, I see a lot of the fisher anglers come to the dock, and you can tell they're just gassed after 2 days of fishing, fried. And we're doing this thing for 30 days, whatever. So longevity is key. So drinking water in the boat and having good sun protection. I wear pants and I wear long sleeve shirts with a hood on, and I wear good sun protection on my face. It allows me to have longevity in the boat, on musky grinders. It same goes for my ice armor gear in the wintertime is I can fish and be warm and be safe and be protected, in that manner. Same with the fishing, with the fish houses and everything else. I think those are the really important things,
Yeah.
And of course lures and a musky fish and a good bucktail, like the big tooth nightie flex or the juice bucktail. The lures are more of an application to me, that's really secondary. You just have to use something that's ultra efficient, that hooks fish and is good, isn't tiny up and this and that. But really, I think one of the most important aspects to fishing is really understanding the structure that you're fishing and how you're presenting those lures to those fish.
Yeah, man, there's a lot of stuff in there, and I can't wait to dive into some more of these things that you just mentioned in future podcasts. I know you can do a clinic, and you do clinics just on hummingbird and the side imaging and how you use that up on Lake of the Woods and other bodies of water and all the other products that you use that help make you successful. So I look forward to diving into that in more detail. Last question for you, Jeff. What drives your outdoor passion?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's the unknown, right? Coming into situations each morning is, especially launching my boat, is the unknown, and there's so many different facets to it. Coming from as a outdoor fishing guide, what drives my passion is making memories and meeting new people and showing them something that I love. When it comes to competitive fishing, I enjoy the competition aspect of it, and when it comes to just fishing in general, I love to compete against the fish, and the elements. Like, boy, we've battled some crazy elements. I love that aspect of it, and winning, and truly wanting to win and push through and test your mental capabilities. Cause there's times where, man, you want to quit. I remember as a young angler, my first 50-incher, I'll tell you this story. I was fishing with a friend of mine. His name was Troy Bertram, and really good musky angler. And we were fishing out of this little 14-foot, Troy's little Lund 14-footer, and we were on Plantagenet, and I was fishing along, and I was a young angler, and I was throwing a topwater bait, a hog wobbler, and I hooked this giant, big one, and it got off like 10 feet from the boat, and I was so mad. And at that time, I put on one of my favorite little bucktails, a lily tail, and with a single hook on it. And I remember Excalibur turning the hook a little bit because we had been losing some fish on that single hook, so we would turn it. And I picked up my rod after I hooked it up, and I threw it out. I go, I wouldn't even effing want to catch a 50-incher right now, right? I was so mad and young and dumb. I wouldn't even want to catch a 50-incher right now. And that cast I hooked, and I caught my first 50-incher right after I lost this giant.
Right.
And I as a young person, I realized that moment could have been defined by me setting the rod down and not pushing on. And I wouldn't have caught that my first 50-incher.
Right.
I could have quit. We could have drove back. I could have pouted. I could have been soaking in my sorrows and whatever else. But at that moment, even though I said that, I still made the cast and I still pushed on. And I caught my first beautiful big. I remember the picture. I'm wearing this green plastic rain suit with these old camo duck hunting bibs and this and that. I'm hoisting. I wish I had the photo up. I'm hoisting this 50-incher up, big fat giant one. And
that's so awesome.
Yeah. So the lesson is that's what it drives me is how much can you push on? How can you push through? There's times where, in anything you want to quit. There's a lot of influences. There's people that want to drive you down or through maybe jealousy or whatever else. And if you're a young person watching this, don't let anybody influence you in a negative factor. Be drawn towards positive influence, and don't let negative get you down. Learn from it. Let it affect your decisions, but don't let it make you quit. Just keep pushing forward. And that's what drives outdoor passion is being able to push on and not let things make you stop. It gets harder and harder. The older you get, the reality of it is it really does. And that's why new endeavors are fun to me. That's why I'm always trying to do new things. And that's like even when we talk about outfitters, there's a challenge with this. There's a great challenge that we have ahead of us with this company. And, well, we have to fight time. We have to fight financial stuff. We have to fight whatever it is, but we're not going to quit. We're going to continue to push forward and build this thing from grassroots,
Absolutely.
And that's what gets me excited, and that's the same thing what drives the outdoor passion is we're going to build a network. And in 5 years, we're going to have a network of people a part of this thing. And it's going to be so fun to see where we grow it, from a little podcast to some great video that Joe and the media team, we're going to have a great media team behind it. We're going to be an educational resource that grows and sells great products that we believe in, and away we go.
Just like you said, it goes back to the passion.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, that's great stuff. And Jeff, it's always fun to sit and talk with you about fishing, but I always appreciate your attitude towards towards fishing and musky fishing specifically because of the physical and mental challenge that exists there, and the amount of fish that you continue to put in the boat is truly amazing, and I love your attitude towards it. It's what the outdoors is about if you want to take it to the next level, and so it's a good lesson for us adults as well.
Yeah, it sure is.
And kids that are out there starting to get into the sport of the drive and the passion behind it. So it's good stuff. Jeff, thank you so much for the time. Looking forward to many more lessons in the hot seat with Jeff in the future. Thank you, Matt, for your time. For Joe behind the camera, and for ABO Outfitters, this is Andrew Murray signing off, podcast number 3. We'll see you guys next time.